When our ancient ancestors, the Rizkians, had to leave Rizk and go to Orion, a constellation with 6 major stars and hundreds of galaxies, they settled in the planets and star systems of Mazzaroth, Arcturus, and Pleiades. They needed to explore their new surroundings. So they created the Rumardian Greys, a race of explorers, by genetic engineering. But some evil reptilians decided to conquer and enslave the Greys, and make hybrids of them. They also sent them to this planet as their spies, and they still control some of them today. According to Christians, there are 7 heavens, which comes from the 7-star cluster of Pleiades. Jesus said in John 14:2, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you." The reptilians are tall beings with dark green scaly skin. Their leader is Haten. Haten was a reptilian who rebelled against his own kind and joined the fight for humanity. He is the original leader of the Ashtar Command. The Ashtar Command is a group of beings that have been watching over Earth since the 1950s. They are human-like but have less water in their bodies and look pale. In 1952, they appeared over the White House and met with President Eisenhower. They asked America to stop using nuclear weapons. But there were also beings from Venus, led by valiant Thor, who warned not to trust the people from Aldebaran. These beings from Aldebaran were offended and went back in time to influence the Thule Society, which led to the rise of the Third Reich, which still rules the world today. Hitler admired the super race with blonde hair and blue eyes. They were created by gene transplants or embryo implantation. Hitler received advanced technology and flying saucers from the beings from Aldebaran, a star in the Taurus constellation. He took them to Antarctica, a continent around the South Pole. They helped him create a superior race for the extraterrestrials. Hitler was connected to Billy Meyer of Switzerland and Claude Vorilhon of France, who claimed to have contact with aliens. They were part of the Ashtar Command, the descendants of the evil Halabeans, Fluggelrods, or Hullab who want to rule the world as the children of the light, or the Illuminati. They brought cloning to Earth. You can see some of their clones today: Bridget Nielsen, Dolph Lundgren, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. They are obsessed with their race. They say they have their own Jesus or Sananda on their ship. They are talking about the Antichrist and they made up the story of Christ's spirit ghost. The leader of this Nordic type is Ashtar Sharon-Asur. They are also in Pleiades, but they use symbols from Arcturus and Venus. In Antarctica, Hitler found a cave in the earth. It was not Shambhala, it was a tunnel, where he met beings from Aldebaran, Pleiades, Andromeda, insect-like, predator-like beings, Dracos, reptilians, and other beings from Orion, where there were bad beings. They added Orion, Pleiades, Arcturus to the Bible in Job 9:9, Job 38:31 and Amos 5:8. These beings are behind the false translations of the Bible and the idea of God and the devil. They influenced the Quran of the Muslims and Sufis and the Kabbalah of the Jews. They also showed Admiral Richard E. Byrd a hidden valley in Antarctica in 1947. They say they are here for the preservation of the planet, but for who? The beings are here for themselves. Biblically, these beings would be classed as cherubim, meaning those spirits who are close or near, familiar spirits, and they are no friends to the Nagaru race. In early Europe, they were the Nordic gods and the spirit and emotional motivators of the Caucasus. The Ashtar Command, now synonymous with the Pleiadians, originally created the Caucasus through a process of ghostation, known today as albanization, by mixing their genes with the albino descendants of the Nagaru and Hindu peoples. The Pleiadians set themselves up as the overlords of the Canaanites, mixing the Caucasus genes in genetic experiments with various predatory animals, including the canine. This gave the Caucasus an animalistic nature, less man and more mankind, kind of a man but not quite. They were despised by their neighbors the Mesopotamians, as proved by the literature of the time. The Martu who know no grain, the Martu who know no house nor town, the boors of the mountains. The Martu who digs up truffles, who does not bend his knees to cultivate the land, who eats raw meat, who has no house during his lifetime, who is not buried after death. They consisted of nomadic clans ruled by tribal chiefs, who pushed into lands they needed to graze their herds, instinctively having a very invasive nature. Over time the Canaanites and their descendants, known to the Egyptians as the Hyksos and Tamahu, eventually seeped into the surrounding lands, invading and overrunning their neighbors, adopting and assimilating the cultures of others where they had no culture of their own. Eventually these tribes became 6 kings or Vikings, savages who came out of Europe raping, robbing, stealing and killing. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica Volume 16, in the 7th to 10th century, because of overpopulation and agricultural problems, the Vikings who were Scandinavians started migrating out into different areas, such as the Baltic Sea area, the Frankish territories, the Caspian and Black Sea area, which is the Caucasus Mountains, where they mixed in with the original indigenous people of those lands, namely dark-skinned woolly-haired people, being referred to as Moors. This produced the mixed races of what is being called Europeans today. The Pleiadians, the overlords of these Canaanite tribes, have their own masters, something today's New Age movement refuses to tell their followers. The Ashtar Command, originally from the Taurus constellation, were fleeing a tragedy in their own star system. Their sun had reached the end of its life, called a supernova, their star was in ashes, so they migrated to different star systems and constellations, one of them being Pleiades. The Pleiades and its 7 stars had been fully conquered by the reptilians, who are meat-eaters. The many worlds orbiting the Pleiadian suns have been turned into farms, forced to relinquish a percentage of their population at regular intervals to satiate the voracious appetites of these carnivorous reptiles. These Nordic gods are not masters but slaves, and upon discovery of this planet Earth, they sought permission from their masters to create a replacement species for service and entertainment, being meat-eaters themselves. On Earth, they encountered a primitive species, today known as the Sans people, who inhabit parts of South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. These Sans people had been evoluted by a previous visitation from beings called by the Egyptians, Neteru. The Pleiadians requested of their masters, "Let us make a man in our image and our likeness, a servant." Through experimentation they created a being called the Lulu, meaning big sheep, mutton, onto Lulu Amilu, a primitive worker who would work for them, entertain them sexually and fight in their many invasions of other people's lands, cultures and resources. The Bible calls these evoluted Lulus, Adamites, who are described as red and ruddy, not fully melanated as the Zulu, just a Lulu, food for the gods. These Lulu are described by the Sumerians as the black-headed ones, who were fully albinized by the time of the birth of Canaan. Canaan was the albino son of Ham, which means black according to the Bible. Ham was the son of Noah, who in the Sumerian tablets, the original story, not the Akkadian one, is called Ziusudra. The flood of Ziusudra is described as a local disaster, a river flood, and was sent to destroy the people of that land, by their overlords, the Anunnaki, Anakites, giants, fallen Nephilim. It had nothing to do with the rest of us. In Egypt, the disaster is described as a great drought, that assisted the collapse of the Old Kingdom and caused the period of chaos that followed. Some of Noah's descendants, a scattered people, moved into the surrounding lands, and some into what is called Africa today, the Absu. Ham and his offspring were not native to the land, just distantly related, migrating and mixing their seed along the eastern side of the continent, eventually exiting back to the so-called Middle East as a tribe of Canaanites, suffering from albinism and leprosy, migrating northwards to escape the African sun. These Adamites, who became Canaanites, onto Vikings and modern-day Caucasus, were told by their overlords, their gods, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Genesis 1:28 has been fulfilled. They have invaded, raped, pillaged and infested every continent on the planet, in anticipation of the great rapture, when their God, according to their Bible, will return and take those chosen, finally fulfilling the Ashtar Command's quota for food to their reptilian masters, like all other Pleiadians. They are not your friends, they are not your saviors, they are not your angels or gods, they are your chef. Don't be on the menu.